It is a rainy, dreary, slushy, snowy day here in North Jersey. And of course, we're sitting in a parking lot, my son and I, waiting for my wife. So what better time than now to make a new video? Stay tuned. Let's get talking. Hello to all my friends out there in YouTube land. It is your good buddy Philtastic Phil here, and I'd like to welcome you back to my channel. Joining me as always for our little drive-by or drive-through, I don't know how you say it, videos is my son MT. And actually, this is an interesting fact. Last night, about 4 o'clock in the morning, so I guess you could say technically this morning, I was feeding him because infants get up every 4 hours. Fixing his hat. And as he's eating, I should say, I'm falling asleep, giving him a bottle, and he's went like this, like pulling on my shirt. And I look down, and he takes the bottle out of his mouth, and he spoke to me. Now, this is highly unusual. I'm assuming he's just ultra intelligent. He's only 2 weeks and change old, but he said, "Look, Dad, tomorrow, I have a good idea for a video. We're going to talk about comics that you read that gave you some kind of fathership advice or fatherhood advice or something like that. And I'm going to sit and I'm going to talk on your video." And I said, "Look, first of all, how are you talking right now?" And he just said to me, "That doesn't matter. All that matters is that tomorrow when we take Mom to her appointment, you're going to record and I'll talk." I said, "Okay, son." So now a couple hours later, we're here. We're ready to record, and he's sleeping. So unfortunately, he will not be speaking on this video. Also, a lot of people have messaged me recently asking about Judi Dench. I know they're very concerned for my safety. We're okay. We have not been back to that parking lot yet. I think we're supposed to go back there at the beginning of April. But I think we should be fine. No Judi Dench. So the topic for today actually came out of a comment on one of my more recent videos from a user by the name of, and I apologize as always if I butcher this, Minute a Minute. If that is right, that's a cool name, by the way. And Minute a Minute shared with me that, well, he congratulated me for our boy being born, which thank you again, sir. And he said, "Hey, my wife is actually due in July." And he's got those feelings of, like I did, of course, of anticipation and excitement and terror because it is a huge jump. So I got to thinking, what are some comic books or even comic book characters I kind of read when I knew I was going to become a father? I know that kind of sounds a little silly, reading a comic for advice. It wasn't really an advice type of thing, and of course, don't take it literal. We know that comic books take their different twists and turns. Look at Cable and Cyclops. You look like you're in your 60s. Your dad looks like he's in his 30s. You know what I mean? And this actually was kind of interesting too. I had just as every father I'm sure does, the minute you find out your wife is pregnant, you get a bunch of books to read. And I've read them as well. My buddy Sam actually gave me a really good one to read. You might remember him from a couple videos ago. But as I said, I'm going to focus on comic book and comic book characters. Now, I'm not referencing issues in particular unless noted. I obviously don't have them here with me because it could be a little dense. So I'm going to tell you either the story or the character or the writer in one case. And hopefully it'll kind of lead you there. If you have any more direct questions, feel free to reach out to me and figure it out from there. I'll let you know exactly what I read. So earlier I had mentioned Cable and Cyclops. Perfect example of a great kind of father and son dynamic, and something I feel like I picked up on as a new father. Now, again, I'm not talking about the fact that Cyclops had to sacrifice, but he had to send his son into the future when he was just an infant to protect him from this virus that Apocalypse had infected him with. No. When I'm talking about the dynamic, well, let's first focus on Cable. If you go to Cable's, not his most recent solo series, or the one before that, the one prior to that, following the Messiah Complex, it really took Cable in a totally different direction, one that I think is one of the better X-related reads, certainly the best of his solo stories, in my opinion. Old Man Cable, we're talking. So following the conclusion to the storyline, I think it was called The Mutant Messiah. This was during a time after House of M, where the number of mutants in the world was greatly reduced to 198. After a couple years of no new mutant births, one new mutant birth pops up, and that is a little baby girl. Of course, immediately you have all of the major players around the globe trying to get this infant, X-Men included. Cable reached out to her first because Bishop suddenly had some sort of premonition that this new infant will somehow bring across the destruction of the mutant race. I'm paraphrasing. I haven't read the series in a very long time, and I encourage you to go back and look at it, of course. That was a negative for me at first because Bishop is one of my favorite X-Men. He's the first character that I got the first appearance of growing up. And I really felt like they took him in a totally different direction. And to be honest with you, I don't know that they've really done him a service as a character since then. I just kind of feel like he's one of those characters they kind of don't know really what to do with right now. Hopefully that'll change soon. But anyway, what happened after that was basically a race through time where Cable and the infant were going timeline to timeline, running from Bishop, who'd almost become almost like a monstrous type of force. It kind of turned into a sci-fi Freddy Krueger movie. And of course, as they leap through time, the child keeps growing older and older and older to the point where you have the child at her age now, where she's Hope, who is a major player on Krakoa. I'm glad to see that they found a place for her. So why do I think that this is a good story when it comes to fatherhood in comics? Plain and simple, from this lesson, you kind of learn that a father will go to any ends of the earth, or in this case time, for the safety and the well-being of their child, even if it means going up against everything that you've known before. Cable knew what the stakes were, and his priority 1,000% of the time was always on Hope. And it makes for a very enjoyable and at times heartfelt story. I encourage you to check that one out. The next one I'm going to bring up is more of an honorable mention. Speaking of Cable, as you may or may not know, when House of 10 and Powers of 10 started, actually a little bit before that, if I'm not mistaken, Old Man Cable was killed, comic book killed, he got better, by young Cable. I, for one, didn't like this change when I saw it. I thought it was a dumb idea. That being said, immediately following House of 10 and Powers of 10, there was a new Cable book launched, and I believe it was, if it wasn't in the first iteration of post Krakoa titles, it was soon after. And this focused on young Cable. I had no intention when this was announced of picking it up. Honestly, what drew me in was artwork by Phil Noto, who is one of my favorite artists. I believe I've noted that on the channel before. But I was pleasantly surprised. It was a great story with a lot of elements focusing on Cyclops and young Cable. So you finally saw that father-son dynamic between these two characters that you hadn't seen for years. I can't point to anything specifically at this moment because I am working right off the top of my head, but I believe every issue of that most recent Cable run should be on Marvel Unlimited. If not, of course, go to your local comic book store and get it in print. There are some really, really great moments where, especially early in the series, it's just Cyclops, Jean Grey, and young Cable, and it's like, wow, this is that family unit, the Summers family unit that we never really got to embrace, in my opinion. And again, so there's no specific lesson, I should say, that I've learned as far as fatherhood goes from that, but I do encourage you to check it out. It is nice to see a closely knit family unit like that among the X-Men, and really among comics. I think that it's kind of a rarity. You see that occasionally in Batman, you see that often in Fantastic Four, But Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Young Cable brings a whole different level to it, and I encourage you to check that out. The next book I encourage you to check out, which does give you a little bit insight, in my opinion, again, I'm only 2 weeks into this, into fatherhood, is actually a book that I recommend to everybody, whether they read comics or not. If you have somebody who says, hey, look, what is all this excitement about? An adult, of course. One of the first books I recommend is King's Mr. Miracle series. I picked it up because of the hype, to be honest with you. I liked King's writing. I didn't get the 12-part series when it was coming out. It was just too much to pull, and I figured, look, I want to get it when it's all collected. I intend to do that with his Adam Strange series as well. But when I picked it up, and again, my knowledge of Mr. Miracle was just limited to, I know he's one of the new gods. I don't know what that means. Besides, you've got the guy who always looks angry with the Peacemaker-style helmet, Apollo, and Darkseid is somehow tied into the new gods. I don't know if this was a typical Mr. Miracle story, but I thought it was just really well done. If you haven't read it yet, you basically go from the perspective of a guy who maybe he's not hitting in all cylinders in life. Without going into too many spoilers, it opens with Mr. Miracle trying to kill himself. From there, you see the evolution of this character as someone who is bound by this other world that he's from, saying this is how you're supposed to be. There's a war you're fighting, this is how you have to be. This is what you have to do. You have to do this, you have to do that. And he wants nothing to do with that world whatsoever. All he wants to really do, at least in my opinion, is hang out, enjoy life with his wife, Big Barda. Everything kind of gets a wrench thrown into it midway in the story when they're in the middle of this big, gruesome, bloody war. And Big Barda reveals, hey, I'm pregnant. From there, it takes a different turn where you have these two characters, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, who did not have the best upbringing because they're from Apocalypse, and are like, well, how are we prepared for this? How can we do this? You know, I'm a superhero, where we're both superheroes, or super characters rather. We can do these great things. Can we raise a child? The lesson that you kind of learn from this, whether you're ready or not, you're ready. I've always been an advocate of rising to the occasion. And certainly when it came to fatherhood, you know, I had that nervousness, and I had all those doubts that I'm sure any new father does. And at the end of the day, it was like, look, I know I can do it because I have to. And I know I'm going to do a great job because I have to. Plain and simple. Again, that's Mr. Miracle. It was a DC Black Label title. You can get it in trade paperback. I think there's a hardcover now. It's actually a book I considered gifting to my friend Sam, who sent me a very good baby book as well. Minute admitted, I can't think of the name of the baby book, but when I get home, I'll look at it and I'll post it in the description of this video in case you want to check out that book. Again, Mr. Miracle. The next comic I'd like to recommend as a good read in preparation for fatherhood is Saga. It's Image title, widely successful, widely popular. It just returned. Now, this is a book I don't read month to month. I don't get the floppy single issues. I get them in trade paperback, and that's how I really recommend that you read them as well. Because if you read one chapter or one trade paperback, you'll know that it goes quickly. It's very well done, and it just is one of those stories that just sucks you in. You know, it's got all of the archetypes that you've seen before, like in a Romeo and Juliet, any space opera that you've ever seen, and it just amps it up to a different level because of just how well it deals with these characters and really enriches these characters. The main male character, whose name I can't think of at the moment, unfortunately, is exceptional in this series, as is the wife, but again, because of this topic of the video, we're going to just focus on him. He's very much a guy, similar to Mr. Miracle. He's in a war he doesn't want to be in. He's in... Oh. Is he chirping in? Nope. Nope, he's going back to sleep. He does that. He chirps and talks. You're welcome. in his sleep without waking up. Anyway, can't think of the main character's name. He's very much in a scenario he doesn't want to be in. He's in a war he doesn't want to be in. You find out he's engaged to somebody who he doesn't really want to be engaged to. And then he meets Alana. They fall in love. They have this child. And they're on the run. And that's pretty much the setup for Saga. Throughout this whole series, you see how his thoughts and his actions and beliefs have to change for the good of the child. For example, he describes himself at the beginning of the story pretty much as a pacifist. How a pacifist got involved in a war kind of escapes me at this moment. But he does have I think it's his family's sword. And there's at one point early in the story where the family's in trouble and his wife Alana is saying to him, "Hey, you got to use that sword. What are you doing?" And he's like, "No, you don't understand. I swore never to use it because all it does is causes harm and destruction." Well, a bit of a spoiler alert. Further into the story, he's going to use that sword. And when he does, you could see it's a whole shift in his mindset from, it's not about my beliefs anymore. It's about protecting my child. And that's something that always kind of really stood out to me in that series. There is also a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, there's a very, very good and heartfelt story involving his father early on in the series. I'm not even going to comment on it because I want you to read the story and I don't want to spoil anything, but 1,000%, if you read it and this is the first time you've ever read it, you will get teary-eyed. And if you don't, you need to go to a psychologist because something is wrong with you. Anyway, again, that is Saga. Available in trade paperback. You could probably get it on Comixology or something, but look, go to your local comic book store. So when I recorded this video a couple days ago from my car, MT wasn't crying because he was hungry or tired or any of the reasons that babies cry. No, he wanted to weigh in on the subject. And I'm going to be honest with you, as a father, I'm impressed and proud because he doesn't know anything about this topic. So I'm just going to go with the fact that he's gifted. That's my theory, at least. But I've agreed to go ahead and speak on his behalf. So MT's pick for a comic book related story, character, property that you can learn some sort of a characteristic from about fatherhood from is the Punisher. Now, I've read a lot of Punisher stories throughout the years. Some of them have been good. Some of them have been just goofy. I'm talking about the Frankencastle thing specifically. I've seen all the Punisher films except for that last one. And I've even seen the Punisher on the Spider-Man animated series back in the day. And I've played the Punisher video games before, too. Actually, they weren't too bad. But I didn't truly understand and grasp this character until I watched the Netflix John Berthel Punisher. It's been a little while, so some of the details might be a little hazy, forgive me. But there's one particular part of season 1. The Punisher was in a big gun battle, and I forgot if this is just a result of him losing a lot of blood or if he was drugged or something like that. And he's fading in and out of consciousness as he's being treated. When he's unconscious, you see flashes of him in his family home in the living room, and he's got his family there. I feel like his friend Micromax's family is there too. I might be wrong about that. But they're getting ready for Sunday dinner. Everybody's all smiles. It looks like a great time. And then in a blink of an eye, these masked assailants just appear behind his family with automatic rifles aimed at their heads. And in that moment, I realized the Punisher's origin is not like any other character. He didn't come from another planet. He's not a mutant. He's not an orphan that was trained like a ninja. No. He is, in fact, every family man's worst nightmare. He's a broken man. So from this, what can we pull? What lesson can we learn from fatherhood, in my opinion? And before I continue, I want to make it 1,000% clear. I'm not advocating any violence in any way or any shape or form. That's just what this character does. But from this, we could learn that his goal in life, his driving factor is not to save the universe or to, save the world from collapsing on itself or anything like that you've seen in other superhero books. No. His driving force is devotion to his family and to loss, and to make sure that something like this tragedy that has befallen him has never occurs to another family again. That devotion is really what I would like to speak to in this section of the video. I quickly learned, once my wife told me she's pregnant, you have to change your thinking. If not just by your natural maturity, because I could tell you a lot of things that may have mattered to me about a year ago just kind of don't matter now, for I guess lack of a better description. But as soon as my wife told me she was pregnant, I started. It did really kind of transform my thinking, and in fact, it kind of motivated me to get a better paying position at my company, to really go for it. Something that I kind of avoided doing for really no other way I could describe it, for a very long time. It's influenced my budget, of course, and you learned a little bit about that in my goals video from a couple weeks ago. At the end of the day, when it's time for you to be a parent and it's time for you to be a father, you know that above everything else, your family and your child is number one. And it's that devotion to your family and to your child that should be your driving factor in all of your decisions. So let's go ahead and get back to the main video. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. As you saw, my co-host woke up. He wanted to have a little snack before lunch, I guess, and we had to deal with that. Luckily, my beautiful wife was just coming out of her appointment, so she's helping him out now. Honey, say hi.
Hi.
Wave.
I can't at the moment.
Okay, good point. Didn't think about that. Anyway, so my last comic-related pick that I would recommend if you're interested in reading a story about fatherhood or about parenting in general. It actually has nothing to do with the story in itself. And it's not one particular arc or whatnot. It's actually an entire series. That is X Factor. Not the most recent series or the one before that, but the one right before that. That was written by Peter David. You had I can't remember the artist, to be honest with you. I know it was a rotating slate of artists. But this was actually just around the time that Cable and Bishop series that I was talking about earlier came around. And it focused on X Factor investigations. Now, what was interesting is that this particular title did not have any heavy hitters as far as the Marvel mutants and characters that you'd be familiar with. The title itself, I'll be honest with you, has nothing to do with the lesson. On a side note, I know there's been a lot of discussion recently in the comics world about the woke comic culture destroying comics and whatnot. And I think a lot of this really attributes to how these stories are coming out, or how at least they're perceived to be coming out. People are seeing these as forced changes and whatnot. But if you're a comic book creator, or you're just a fan like me, who really want to see how this was done years before woke culture was ever a thing, and was done really well, check out this series. I mean, you had everything from two characters from X-Force, Richter and Shatterstar, coming out as gay. You had a lot of dealing with feminism and alcoholism. Really, Peter David was talking about these important social issues that are so prevalent in the comic book industry today, before it was, really in vogue to do so. And he was doing it in a way that didn't really piss a lot of people off. So going back to our main focus here, the reason I'm recommending this book for parenthood and for fatherhood isn't because of any one of the stories or story elements involved in here. Really, one thing that stands out to me, at least when I think about this title, is the recap page. Peter David not only used that recap page at the beginning of the titles at the time to fill you in on what was going on with the characters, but he also included a little sliver about what was going on in his life. And, sometimes it was very light. It was like, my daughter and I went to see, I think this was at the very beginning of the MCU, so he might have said something, we went to go see Captain America, we enjoyed it, blah, 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 or, we decided to take a family trip and blah, blah. But really, it took a turn about midway through the series. Peter David unfortunately suffered a very big stroke. and it was questionable whether he'd be able to continue on the book or really how his quality of life would be. And in that time, rather than replace him as a writer, I guess he had everything outlined meticulously. His wife stepped in and actually helped flesh out the series and whatnot, going off of his notes, of course. But in the recap page, she was very good about updating everybody on Peter's status and talking about what was going on in their life. And for that reason, again, not for the story, but really for the recaps, I'd recommend this to not only anybody becoming a father, but anybody becoming a parent. Again, that's X Factor. We're talking 1, 2, 3 series ago at this point. Well, again, these are my recommendations for comics that can, in their own little way, help you prepare for fatherhood or parenthood. Leave a comment. Tell me what you thought about this little kind of impromptu list. Are there any titles that I haven't read that you can recommend? Let me know. I'm always interested in learning more. And don't forget, we do have a giveaway going on. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to a couple videos ago and take a look, because it's a chance for you to win free comics, and time is running out. Thank you for checking out this video. I do appreciate you doing so. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Peace, love, and comics. Take care.